about many points of how Ebola has shaped today's foundations of deadly virus protocols, and how doctors today are also more precautious with hot agents. And along with that, we'll be covering topics about the characters and scenes of the books. Alex, do you want to talk about some of the characters?
Yeah, for sure. So starting off, we have Jerry Jacks, who's a veterinarian member of the Army. He's married to Nancy Jacks, which really helps out the story. He was the chief of U.S. USMRID Veterinary Division, and although he had no experience with extreme biohazard agents, he and his team knew well how to handle monkeys. Jerry Jacks conferred with Johnson about how to approach the mission.
That's really cool. That sounds like he's such a big character in this book.
Yeah, he is.
And you said that he's married to Nancy Jacks,
Yeah.
who's also a character in the book?
Would you like to talk about Nancy Jacks?
Sure, I would love to. So Nancy Jacks is an Army veteran, and so her name throughout the book is Colonel Nancy Jacks, and she takes matters into her own hands when she realizes what a big event that this monkey house is doing, and she convinces employees at the research facility to hand over more samples from the infected monkeys from the house. And meanwhile, also at USMRID, which is where she works along with many other people in this story, Jax and another character, Darling, test new specimens and face viruses along through their microscope.
One of the other main characters is C.J. Peters. He's a former Army colonel and a field virologist and physician. His discovery is crucial in identifying the nature of the arrested virus. Colonel C.J. Peters, the Chief of Disease Assessment Division at USMRID, he oversees the military response to the arrested incident and coordinates with the civilian authorities.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, he plays a very big part in the book. So along when we were talking about Jackson Jarling, so Peter Jarling is a civilian virologist, and along with Thomas Giesberg, Jarling is also putting his life at risk by unknowingly, because when he's testing a sample from the monkey house, he unknowingly sniffs a vial that is going to contain Ebola virus, and despite his reputation as a careful man, he still does this. And after his exposure, he works tirelessly to study the strain and to decontaminate the monkey house, which is also cool that he doesn't become ill.
Yeah.
Even though he sniffed the bottle.
And then another main character is Dan Dalgard, who's a veterinarian. Dalgard removes a piece of spleen and collected throat swab from one of the dead monkeys, and he sent it to Peter Jarling, who is the civilian virologist at USMRID. Dalgard believes the disease killing the monkeys was simian hemorrhage fever, also SHF, which was fatal for monkeys but didn't affect humans.
And at first they thought that instead of the Ebola breakout that was happening, they just thought it was SHF that was killing all of them. And then another virologist, Gene Johnson, had infected monkeys through their lungs with Marburg Ebola to see if the virus was the actual one. And then also, so she figured out that if the particles were inhaled, they could indeed cause an infection, which was a different strain of Ebola that they found.
Yeah. So one of the final characters is the Army, which just came in at kind of halfway the last part through just to help. USMRID, the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, plays a crucial role in investigating, containing, and researching the viral outbreaks. Towards the end, the monkey house got given to them, so then they got to continue their research there.
And also I thought, which was pretty cool, within the Army, when they were evacuating the monkey house, that they were that they had many younger 18-year-olds kind of that helped with decontaminating the house, and those young people also risked their lives just so that other people wouldn't get sick, which we thought was pretty cool.
So the point of this book is in third person, so it's a narrator telling the story of what happened.
And basically, which is cool, because the narrator wasn't actually even in the book, but he had just collected so much knowledge from reports about what happened during the specific event, and also he had many characters tell him about what had happened, and he had so much info on it, which on the story, which really painted the picture of what had happened.
Alright, so moving on, the plot, the central conflict is that there's a new disease that scientists and doctors can't seem to figure out. It's killing a lot of people and animals, the monkeys. The setting is mostly in Reston, Virginia, which is where the monkey house is located.
And it's kind of around Washington, D.C., where another base of the USMRID area was. so they communicated with each other throughout it. And then also, it was kind of located in Africa in some parts, because the book would flash back, and that was also pretty cool.
The most memorable moment of this book for us was when the monkey escaped towards the end a little bit. And it took them a very long time to catch it because they were in their spacesuits and they could only see so much through the suit and the sweat building up, like the condensation. And they eventually had to leave the monkey in there overnight, which
could have also impacted the rest of the research on the monkeys. Because if that monkey had Ebola and had given it to the other ones and if the other monkeys wouldn't have gotten it, then that could have maybe slowed down the outbreak. But instead, that monkey also caused a lot of havoc.
While it was escaping, a lot of the other monkeys started biting its feet because they started to get angry that one was out and couldn't seem to get out of the area. So the monkey was bleeding everywhere and was getting maybe exposed blood all over the area. So if one of the researchers were to touch that with a cut or accidentally inhale it, which they didn't know if it was airborne or not, they could catch it. So they had to be very careful trying to control the monkey.
Along with the part about them inhaling it, I thought what was cool, because in the beginning of the book, they talked about a different strain of Ebola, which had been happening very early on. That was probably one of the first cases of it. But then it was super cool to see how Ebola has kind of morphed into other similar types. There's the Reston strain and the Zaire strain. And then also I thought it was cool, because instead of most books about viruses, they'll just talk about one. I would think in this book they would just be talking about Ebola, but they also talked about Marburg and how they kind of thought the similar differences about that one.
At the very beginning, there's a couple pages in, there's a scene on the airplane where this one guy starts throwing up black vomit and seems to be very sick. And for the beginning, it gives us a really good idea of what the virus does to people without spoiling too much about what actually happens and how they figure out what goes on during it.
Yeah.
But it just helps you get a good picture of what's going on.
And along with that, they also talked about other cases in Africa and other people, such as Peter Cardinal, who had become infected with Marburg virus, and then they will name a strain after whoever becomes infected with it if it's a new strain, which I thought was also pretty cool.
So then, another thing we can talk about is comparing Ebola to COVID-19, which is something that we've all had to go through in the past couple of years. Ebola has been around for many years.
And still, there are some very minuscule cases that happen, mostly in Africa now.
Yeah, but it doesn't really have a vaccine yet, or a cure. But with COVID-19, it's been around for a lot less time, maybe, I think it's 5 or 6 years now, and it already has a vaccine. And when reading The Hot Zone, we can kind of connect to what the people are experiencing, not really the symptoms so much, but how the quarantine, the precautions, and we had to also go through somewhat of the same thing with COVID.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool, because we could, in our own brains, kind of connect our experience to COVID, and then their experience probably to Ebola.
Yeah.
And then some kind of I thought some very interesting, cool parts of this was kind of on page 126. When the scientists and stuff were seeing the monkey house become infected, they saw so many monkeys starting to die, and that's kind of where the original panic started to set in.
Yeah, and then on page 155, the text states, "Okay, you're testing for Marburg," CJ said. "Are you going to include a test for Ebola?" "Sure, I've already thought about that." "When will your test be done? Because if the monkeys have Marburg, we have to figure out what to do." This shows that this is the very beginning when they realize that something is very wrong, and then you start getting everything under control.
And this kind of took base for the ideas of how they're going to start testing all the monkeys, how they're starting to isolate them, and how after all of this that they have to start determining if they're gonna completely evacuate the monkey house and kill all of the monkeys so that this doesn't spread to other parts of the U.S. Because throughout this story, so many people, once the news got out that there might be a new infection that has, what was it, a 90% mortality?
Yeah, but I think it's 9 out of 10.
Mortality rate, and people were starting to freak out about this, so they had to contain it and keep the project under wraps. Okay, so
for imagery in this book, it was really crazy, and it had a lot of details in it, and it could really help you picture what was going on. and it made it feel like that you were in the spacesuit, so you were dealing with the virus yourself, because it was giving you such a good idea of what was going on inside of it. It was so descriptive on how it was so hot in there, and they could barely see because of the sweat, and that they all the precautions they had to go through to get sterile so that they could enter the monkey house.
And kind of like the mood or tone, like all throughout the story, like it was very intense and very informative, which I thought was kind of cool because I haven't read many books about that. So then kind of like to talk about like the summary of the book. So it kind of just starts off talking about different cases of Ebola and kind of gives you a background knowledge about what it is. And then because it originally starts in Africa, then it suddenly appears kind of in the suburbs of kind of Washington, D.C. or the Western Virginia, and from shipments from other places, because they would keep those monkeys and then they would ship them out to other parts of the U.S. because those were very important. Because you can, at that time, it would be more okay to test viruses and stuff on monkeys than like a rabbit or a rat, let's say. And then once they started figuring out, kind of the story was telling that there is literally like no cure to it. Like you either, because most people, whenever they get it, they start black vomiting, which is like gross vomit when you're like spewing out your organs, because your body basically just decomposes inside of it. And then after this, so once it gets to the monkey house, then like secret military, as we talked about, USMRID, and many specialized scientists were entered into that monkey house to start to think about what they're going to do with that. So because Ebola is a hot agent, level 4 is what they call it. So it's like the top of the line, most dangerous, horrible,
very infectious
disease. So basically the story after that kind of narrates how they evacuated it, and then also it kind of goes into different like points of view that talk about how this is affecting people, and then that's basically it.
So moving on, my opinion of the book is that it was pretty good, and I'm really interested in diseases and infections and stuff like this, so I really liked it. I'll probably rate it maybe an 8 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I don't know if this is like my favorite type of book, but I think for what the book was narrating and showing stuff, I thought it was a pretty good 7 out of 10.
Yeah, and it really gave you a good idea of what people had to go through and what they do with like when there's a new agent out.
And on the back of this book, it says, like, there's just like quotes on the back that it's like utterly engrossing and makes your blood curdle, and I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Going back to the imagery, I thought, like, especially with the airplane scene, I thought it was like gross, and I thought I was
at the
in
very
that airplane.
beginning.
Most books, like, it takes time to get into the events of what happens, but this book like jumps straight into it, and it hooked us right away.
Yeah, it really makes you want to turn the page, and it makes it really fun to read.
Yeah, I think that's
about it. Thank you for watching Ebola Exposed.